Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested.
And Frank from Tested.
Frank, looks like you've been working on some secret projects outside of your normal Tested responsibilities.
What can I say?
Oh, this is awesome. So Frank made for Dan Lanigan's Fan-o-Rama Futurama fan film, the Hypnotoad.
Yeah, I figured I already did the Professor, I already did Zoidberg, I want to do something else.
Wow, so tell me what the brief was and then how you went about making this.
Well, Dan wants to kind of combine the realistic element with sort of a hint of the cartoony stuff. So he wanted to make this a toad, more of a toad than a cartoon. So I got Brian Wade to help me sculpt this. Brian's an amazing sculptor, worked on tons of films like The Thing and stuff like that. And so he banged out the sculpture really quick for us. And then Dan approved it, and he knew that that was the direction we wanted to go. Dan originally wanted to do stop motion eyes, which I thought would have been really awesome, and we would have done these little hand crank breathing mechanisms so the whole thing could be stop motion animated. I said, no. Let's throw OLED lenses in here and actually animate the eyes. And so I popped around on the internet a little bit, and Tiny Duino has these tiny little LCD or OLED screens that I was able to figure out how to program and make them do these animations. And based on that and the size of the eyeball lens that would go on the outside, I had Brian sculpt this to that scale.
So what you got was clay sculpture, presume, that's this size, and then it was your job to turn it into something that you can fit the electronics in, and also it does a little bit of animation.
Yeah, I put Dan wanted some really subtle movements, so I have a little mechanism in here just to give him little head turns. The arms had rods in them, and then there was also an air tube that you could blow into to make his stomach breathe.
Oh.
So we gave it subtle movements. It didn't need to do a lot because in the cartoon, it just sits there static and the only thing that moves are the eyes. So Dan wanted to bring that extra little bit of life to it.
Now to make it a mech, now how did that change the way you would then mold it, cast it, and finish it?
Well, we molded it pretty much the same way I do any matrix mold. And I just made registration so I could put a core in it so that I could make a skin. I wanted to keep the skin kind of thin so that it would still have that movement, but not bind up funny.
What does the core look like?
I basically put a thin sheet of clay inside of the mold and then poured that solid with a resin. And then I drilled a hole in there and then injected the silicone in between that core and that outer mold.
And explain that the core is basically like the structure inside.
Yeah, so then I made a mold of that core and then rotocast a plastic shell, which this silicone skin sat on top of.
Right, so the core itself is hollow.
Yeah.
Then you have the room for the bladders, for electronics.
Yep.
And it literally is skin that moves around a resin core.
Yeah.
Wow, and then the finishing and painting, because there's glossy parts, there are really slimy parts, and of course you have the eyes. Talk about that.
This is the same way that we do all the silicone painting. It's thinned down caulking with some naphtha and some pigments and stuff like that. And I wanted to keep the toad a little bit shiny. I didn't want it to go too matte or anything. I wanted it to look a little bit wet. And I wanted to try and stick to the color palette of the cartoon, but still give it a little bit of life.
Right.
A little bit of modeling and differences in colors and stuff like that.
Yeah, the cartoon definitely doesn't have all those details, all the bumps that a real life toad would have.
Yeah.
But from afar and even up close, that silhouette really reads as Hypnotoad.
Yeah, it was really important for Dan to make sure that when you look at it, it's Hypnotoad, not a frog, not a, so it was finding, like with everything, finding that balance between the cartoon and the real life and, being able to make something really neat.
Awesome. Totally great job, and thank you for sharing with us those details on your side projects.
What are you going to do?
And you'll be able to see Hypnotoad in Dan Lanigan's Fan-o-Rama Futurama fan film. It's going to be on YouTube. I think it's coming up in a few months, so check it out.